As I said, I fell asleep without noticing it, and even somehow continuing to turn these matters over in my mind. Suddenly I dreamed I took the revolver and, remaining seated, pointed it at my heart. My heart and not my head, and I had firmly decided beforehand to shoot myself through the head, through the right temple to be precise. I pointed it at my breast and waited a second or two while the candle, the table, and the walls suddenly moved and swayed. I hurriedly pulled the trigger. In dreams you can fall from a height, or someone can cut you or hit you, but you never feel pain, except when you really hurt yourself somehow in bed. Then you do feel pain and nearly always awaken. It was so in this dream of mine. I felt no pain, but it seemed to me that after the shot everything was shaken inside me and everything suddenly faded and it grew very dark around me. I seemed to go blind and mute, and to be lying on something hard flat on my back, seeing nothing and unable to make the slightest movement. People moved around me, calling and shouting, the captain in his bass voice, the landlady screaming, and then suddenly there was another interval and I was being carried in a closed coffin. I felt the coffin swaying and reflected on this, and suddenly I was astonished for the first time by the idea that I was dead, quite dead, that I knew this and had no doubt about it, that I could not see or move, and yet that I could feel and think. But I soon became reconciled to this and accepted the fact unquestioningly, as usually happens in dreams. And then they buried me in the earth. They all went away and I was left alone, absolutely alone. I made no movement. When I had imagined formerly what it would be like when they buried me in my grave, I really only associated feelings of dampness and cold with the grave. And now, too, I felt I was very cold, particularly in the tips of my toes, but nothing else. I lay there strangely enough without waiting for anything, accepting unquestioningly the fact that the dead have nothing for which to wait. But it was damp. I don't know how much time passed, an hour, or several days, or many days. Then suddenly a drop of water which had soaked through the lid of the coffin fell on my closed left eye, and in a minute it was followed by a second one, and in another minute by a third, and so on, each after an interval of 1 minute. A deep indignation suddenly flared up in my heart, and suddenly I felt a physical pain in it. That's my wound, I thought. That's where I shot myself. The bullet is there. And the drop of water continued falling minute by minute on my closed eye. And suddenly I called out, not with my voice, for I was physically helpless, but with my whole being, upon the power and control of everything which was happening to me. Whosoever you are, if you exist, and if anything more intelligent exists than what is now happening here, allow it to be in this place too. If you are taking vengeance on me for my unintelligent suicide, the indecency and absurdity of another existence, know then that no torture that could ever befall me can compare with the contempt which I will silently experience if necessary for millions of years of torture. I called out and then was silent. The deep silence continued for almost a minute and another drop fell. But I was boundlessly and infallibly certain and believed that everything would immediately be changed. And so then my grave suddenly opened. That is, I don't know whether it was opened and dug up, but I was taken up by some dark being unknown to me, and we were in space. Suddenly I could see. We were in the depths of the night, and such darkness I'd never seen before. We swept on through space and were now far away from the earth. I did not question the being who carried me along about anything. I waited proudly. I told myself I was not afraid and grew still with delight at the thought that I was not afraid. I don't remember how long we passed on, and I can't imagine the time. Everything happened as it always happens in dreams, when one leaps over space and time and the boundaries of existence and of the mind, stopping only at points about which the heart muses. I remember I suddenly saw a small star in the distance. "Is that serious?" I asked suddenly, unable to contain myself, for I did not wish to ask any questions. "No, that is the star you saw between the clouds when you were returning home," answered the being who was bearing me away. I knew it possessed a form resembling the human, but strangely enough I did not like this being. I even felt a deep revulsion. I had experienced complete non-existence, and so had shot myself through the heart. And now I found myself in the arms of a creature who, though not human, still was and existed. Ah, so there is life beyond the grave, I thought with the peculiar carelessness of the dream world. And if I must exist again, I thought, and live again by the desire of some unalterable will, I do not want to be conquered and subjected. You know I fear you, and therefore you despise me, I suddenly told my companion, unable to refrain from making the humbling question which contained the admission, and experiencing this humiliation in my heart like a pinprick. He did not answer my question, but I suddenly felt that I was not despised, and that I was not being laughed at, that I was not even being pitied, and that our journey had a goal, an unknown, mysterious goal which concerned me alone. Fear increased in my heart. Something mute but tinged with suffering communicated itself to me from my silent companion and pierced me. We sped through dark, unfathomable spaces. I had long ceased to see the constellations to which my eyes were accustomed. I knew there are stars in the heavenly regions whose rays reach the earth only after thousands and millions of years. Perhaps we had passed those spaces. I waited for something to happen in a terrible, heart-destroying depression. And suddenly a well-known and extremely powerful feeling shook me. I suddenly saw our sun. I knew this could not be our sun, giving life to our earth, and that we were separated from our sun by a boundless space. But for some reason I knew in my whole being that it was exactly the same kind of sun as ours, its double. A sweet, evocative feeling rang out delightedly in my soul. The native power of light, the same which had given me birth, found an echo in my heart and resurrected it, and I experienced life, the former life, for the first time after my grave. "But if this is the sun, if this is exactly the same sun as ours," I cried, "then where is the earth?" And my companion pointed to a star, sparkling in the darkness with an emerald sheen. We were speeding toward it. Can such duplicates be possible in the universe? Can this be the law of nature? And if that is the earth over there, can it be like our earth? Exactly like? Unfortunate, poor, but dear, and always beloved, giving rise to the same tormenting love of itself even in the most ungrateful of its children, as does ours? I cried, shaken by an uncontrollable ecstatic love for that former earth which I had abandoned. The image of the poor girl I had hurt flashed through my mind. "You shall see everything," my companion answered, and a kind of sadness sounded in his words. But we were fast approaching the planet. It grew under my eyes. I could already distinguish the ocean and the contours of Europe, when suddenly a strange feeling of a kind of lofty and holy jealousy burst into my heart. How can such a copy exist, and to what end? I love and can only love the earth I left, the earth on which my blood has remained, when in my ingratitude I shot myself through the heart and extinguished my life. But I never ceased to love that earth, and on the night during which I parted from it I probably loved it more tormentingly than ever before. Does suffering exist on this new earth? On our earth we can only love sincerely with suffering and through suffering. We do not know how to love any other way and know no other love. I want to suffer so that I can love. I thirst in this moment to kiss, weeping tears, that very earth which I left, and I do not desire or accept life on any other.